Okay, everyone, we are in Chayei Sarah, which it's in Genesis chapter 23. And I'm going to read a little bit from 23, 24, 25, and then we'll dive into the Torah portion. So in chapter 23, verse 1, it says, "Now Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Then Abraham rose from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth." Okay, I'm gonna stop right there and go to chapter 24, verse 1. "Now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, 'Please place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live. But you will go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac." Yitzhak. And let's go to 25 and 25:1. "Now Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah." We are going to have a little discussion there about that. But that's the reading right now from the Torah. So if we could do the blessing after the reading. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nato b'tekenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah." Amen. Amen. Boy, we have a lot here today. Let's see how much. Yeah, you know what, you're right. You know, I've shared before that when we did the 3-year going through the Torah portion in 3 years, the Torah portions were smaller. And I had one Torah portion that was just one paragraph. That's all it was, one paragraph. And I thought, what am I going to do with this? You know, once you know it, I don't even think we went through that whole one paragraph. There was just so much there. So, you know, but that's the way the Lord is when, you know, with his writings and when we're reading, there's just so much there. And if you have any nuggets or anything to share, just jump right in because we have ourselves a lot to cover here. All right. Right away in Roman numeral 1, Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. The life of Sarah. One thing I find here with this one is, well, Sarah is the only woman in Scripture whose age, death, and burial are mentioned. And it's probably to do honor to the mother of the Hebrew people. Chayei Sarah means the life of Sarah. It's ironic that this parashah titled "The Life of Sarah" begins with what? The death of Sarah. And Sarah is also the only woman in Torah or in the Bible whose name God changes. Okay, so there's a lot there. But you know, I was reading from just like secular people that were saying that you really find out about a person after they have died. especially, you know, at the burial when you start, and I know that because we've had memorial services here that you're sitting there and they're speaking about the person that had passed away, and it's like, boy, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't. Yeah. It's just like Jackie Lopes. You know, when you find out that, you know, the poetry that she would write or the songs or all this, her whole background, was like, oh boy, man, this was an amazing woman, you know. Go ahead, Maria, and use the microphone, please.
You know, every time I read slide or somebody
Turn it up there.
it seems strange to me that they always kill the good ones. Because I have never read that this person he was a thief and he went to jail. He's been in jail 40. Every single person that has died, they were always good and they were always going to be doctors. Every single one of them were going to be doctors, no matter how many were killed. But I learned in reading that if a Hebrew person gives the eulogy for that person,
Right.
that if they say something that's wrong, that they try to make out the person is really nice when he wasn't, that if they say something nice regarding that person, it's regarded as a sin.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know this from doing eulogies or memorial services, that if they didn't know the Lord or something like that, I would never say that they're in a better place, you know. You can't say that. But what I'm there to do is comfort the family, you know, and encourage the family, you know. So but I'll tell you what a joy it is to do a service for a person that does know the Lord. I mean, like Reuben. Reuben, we were hawking peanuts at his memorial service. So no, you know, that was fun, that was joyful, but we know that Reuben's with the Lord. Same thing with our sister Carol. You know, what a joy, you know, it is when you do a service for somebody that you know that they have a relationship with. Now they've got a very close relationship. Go ahead, Maria.
That subject is getting really close to my heart, being old and dying.
Okay, Sarah.
But I learned that the righteous, like Moses and Sarah, when they died, it was a different kind of death. It wasn't anguish or it was more like a joy. They were going back to their God.
Yeah.
And I believe Pastor Bruce, he said that he noticed that people who are believers in God, that when they pass, their countenance is more peaceful. There's no anguish shown in their face. Am I right?
Right.
I am right.
I wouldn't argue with you even if you were. That may be the last time you're right today.
You know, but let's talk about Sarah, okay? And when we talk about Sarah, I mean, we are in chapter 20, what did I say, 23? We're in 23, but we're going to have to go back a little. Okay, so in Genesis 17, when Abram was 99 years old, God declared his new name Abraham, a father of many nations, and gave him the covenant of circumcision. God gave Sarai, that's the way I'm going to pronounce it, Sarai, a new name, Sarah, and blessed her. Sarai means princess, but we're gonna have a little discussion here because we're gonna find out when you get in here, it's all over the place. But Sarai, so it gives her a new name, Sarah. Sarah, one commentary said it means my princess. Okay, belonging to the Lord. In Genesis 17, 15, 16, it says, then God said to Abraham, as for your wife Sarai, you shall not call her by the name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and indeed I will I'll give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she will be a mother of nations. Kings of people will come from her. Sarah never did live long enough to witness being the mother of nations. Sarah was 127 years old when she died. And then we're going to go on in a little bit. I'm not going to give you a hint yet, but but what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the name. In letter A, I put down Sarai means princess. Sarah, my princess, a mother of many nations. Okay, what you're gonna, like I said, what you'll find out is with a lot of these, when you start doing an in-depth study, Sarai comes from the original, from the word Sar. Sar meaning prince or but there's not a whole lot there. Then when you go to Sarah, what does Sarah mean? Princess. So they both mean a princess. Well, what's the difference? I've heard how they put the H, the ha in there, and that's like the breath of God. That's one reasoning, and I like that. But you got to understand there's more to it. And I want to show you something. Let me see, where did I put that, Peggy? So, okay, one thing in 15, okay, where we just read, as for Sarai, shall not call her by the name Sarai, but by Sarah. Okay, it goes on to say, then Abraham fell on his face. I'm reading in Genesis 17, now I'm in 17. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, will a child be born to a man 100 years old? And will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth to a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael, and it goes on like that. But did you notice in verse 15 that God tells Abraham that his wife's name will no longer be Sarai, but Sarah? Immediately, Abraham then falls before the Lord in his heart, and he immediately calls his wife Sarah. From that point, I mean, how long would it take for you, if you had a name, I'll just say Maria, and then all of a sudden, you're not going to be called Maria anymore, you're going to be called Mary. How many people are going to come up to you and just say, Maria, Maria? It's going to take a while. But right here, I noticed that immediately, well, at least to us, it looks like immediately, Abraham then falls before the Lord, and in his heart, he immediately calls his wife Sarah. And from that point on, he always calls her Sarah. I just thought, when God changes things, it's immediate. Much the same way when you were born again in him, the change in you was immediate. Okay. And well, you know what? You're right. And final. Go ahead, Pastor
Well, I
Kevin.
was just gonna say, but yet it takes us a while, like even the transition of learning to say Yeshua has taken, it takes
Yes.
a while.
Yeah.
Because you're so trained.
You're so trained. Yeah.
Retrained.
And how many times have we covered this portion? I noticed that Peggy and I were even talking about it this morning. Immediately, he didn't say Sarah, he said Sarah.
To me, it just seems like it's a devotional thing for him because, he knows what those words mean, but now he's saying, my princess, even though he knows it's God gave the name, but it seems like it's more intimate. I don't know.
I think it is. I think it's intimate, but one thing you're going to find out, what we saw was there was some writers that said, no, Sarai meant my princess and Sarah meant princess. And I thought, oh my God, so like I said, it's all over. But you may have some things that we're still hanging on to, but he said in his word, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. So the new in Messiah. Abraham realized that it wasn't just a simple name change. There was more to it, and especially being the mother of many nations. Okay. And now I'll go on. And there's one other place in the Bible that mentions the number 127. She died at 127 years old. Did anybody look that up? One other place. Turn in your Bibles to the book of Esther in chapter 1. If you're listening in, you have your Bibles there with you, turn to the book of Esther, and we're going to read in chapter 1, verse 1. What's the king's name? Ahasuerus. Okay. Ahasuerus. Now it happened in the days of Ahasuerus that Ahasuerus, who reigned from India to Cush, over 127 provinces. A province is, when it mentions provinces here, it's mentioning nations. The Persian Empire of that time, it was vast, and there was a vast amount of nations that came under that rule. Esther, one thing you'll probably ask me, well, that's verse 1. Esther wasn't queen yet. Okay, now let's jump over to chapter 9, verse 29 and 30. Okay, chapter 9, 29 and 30. Then it says, then Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. He sent letters to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, namely words of peace. And it goes on, and truth. Esther was now queen, and she ruled 127 nations. Esther was a Benjamite, okay, from the tribe of Benjamin, the son of Jacob. The prophecy spoken about Sarah did come to pass through Esther. So, yep, that was very interesting. Okay, so in letter B, Sarah dies at 127 years. Okay, Book of Esther, only other place where the number 127 appears. And it's not a coincidence. So your fill-ins are 127 and coincidence. In letter C, Esther ruled 127 provinces. Prophecy over Sarah is fulfilled. So, oh, Maria, go ahead. Go ahead, Maria.
How true is what the sages say about her age, that, because in the Hebrew scriptures, it says she was 127.
Right.
And they say it's because when she reached her age, that she looked like she was 20 and had the innocence of a 7-year-old child.
And Rashi says the same thing. He puts it the same way. That even, and they talk about her beauty. So you know that when she was 90 years old, she was a beautiful woman, and why not? I mean, she aged gracefully, that kings and of other lands, they looked at her and they saw the beauty within. And some people, I've read something where they said the beauty isn't only speaking of outward beauty, it's speaking of inward beauty.
It's not what the king was looking at.
That's exactly. Pastor Bruce said that isn't what the king was looking at, but and exactly, well, but you know what, the Pharaoh, she was what? Yeah, and well, she didn't age. I say she aged gracefully, but you're right, she probably didn't age, because they said at, what is it, 100, she looked like she was 20 and had the innocence of a 7-year-old. That it could have been, but then it would have had to change her at one point. But I wonder if he calls us before we are even born. So I think that this was probably already inside of her, even, before they even, well, that's my understanding.
But
Go
if
ahead.
they lived twice as long, then I would think they would age more gracefully, so it would be the new 60, right?
Well, that they were very athletic. They were very athletic, because to walk all the way from Haran all the way down to Canaan, I mean, I know that they probably had some wagons or whatever being pulled, but most of it was just walking. Go ahead, Maria.
But then we look at David. If you remember, in his last days, he was confined to a bed because he was so old. And they looked for a virgin to warm his body up.
Yeah.
He was 77.
Yeah.
What happened to him? He got no breath of life in him. Maybe it was because of his lifestyle. He was a man of war, and he was fighting and constantly under pressure and stress. And
How many wives did he have?
oh, well, that did it too, They didn't know they were dying, but he was confined to bed.
Pastor Doug.
It's also been rumored that when Sarah's name was changed to Sarah, he was also made youthful again.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. Since the name of this parasha is the life of Sarah, let's talk about her for just a little while more. Josephus says that Sarah is Abraham's niece. Okay, that is where the whole idea of the niece comes in. Rashi jumps on it and says the same thing, even though it's mentioned a few times that Abraham married his half-sister, more than a few times. Okay, now the thing is with Rashi and Josephus, I thought it was interesting that this past Shabbat, Pastor Bruce shared something with us, that it was Josephus who said that Magog is Russia. Could Josephus be wrong? Well, apparently he was wrong. Okay, and I think he was wrong here. And like I said, Rashi jumped all over it, and he even said that he may have married his niece. But let's read it. We know that Terah had 3 sons. He had Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran. Haran fathered Lot, and Haran died. Okay. Genesis 11:29 says, Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Ishka. Okay, and the name Ishka, and I'm reading from the New American Standard. All right, but I also checked the Complete Jewish Bible, and I also checked out the Orthodox Jewish Bible. All of them read the same way. Milcah, the daughter of Haran. One daughter, not 2. That's in all three places, it doesn't say, and they were the daughters of Haran, but one daughter. Yes, Nahor married his niece. We can factor that in and read it there, but not Abraham. Now, who is Ishka? She may be the daughter of another wife, because it wasn't uncommon for the men to have multiple wives or a concubine. Okay, so which Ishka means to see. All right, that's the meaning. Some say this is another name for Sarah. So the to see would mean that Sarah is a prophetess, that she could prophesy. And that's why they grab that name and they say they're talking about the same person. And that means he would have married his niece. Okay. Marrying a half sister, we've already seen that was common in ancient times. Okay. So who's to say that Ishka may have ended up being married to Lot, her half brother? Okay. And the reason I say this makes sense to me, because wasn't it Lot's wife who couldn't help but turn to what? To see the destruction of Sodom. So that's just one understanding there. Okay, I didn't read this anywhere, but when I was going through this study, I thought, you know what, if it means to see, maybe it was Lot's wife, because we're not told anywhere the name of Lot's wife. Okay, so and letter, well, no, let me go further. Abraham was given assurance that Sarah would have a son in chapter 17. Sarah was described as exceptionally beautiful even as she aged. And then we go down into when they traveled into Egypt. Abraham said to her, I know that you are beautiful to behold, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me. Boy, what a lot of trust that Abraham had in the Lord. But they will let you live. Say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared on your account. Okay, that was in Genesis 12. Her beauty was affirmed in Egypt, and she was taken into Pharaoh's harem, where she was protected by God. And the truth about her eventually came out. You know, it may have helped that plagues came upon the people, and and the women weren't getting pregnant, and you know. But aside from her attractiveness, Sarah was also barren. Okay, she was barren until her covenant with God, where God promised to give her a child. It was because of this covenant that's when God changed her name to Sarah. Okay. And true to his word, Sarah got pregnant and she gave birth to Isaac. Okay. You know, this is, I know we're reading here in Genesis, and later on we're going to cover it, but Abraham ends up having more children. And Sarah, we know, only had one child. You know, but Peggy brought something up very interesting to me, because I said, well, that just proves there that Sarah was the one that was barren. It was only because of her that they couldn't have any children. It wasn't because of Abraham. But then she pointed out, yeah, but didn't it say in the word earlier that, you know, Abraham is as good as dead? In fact, that's the way she put it. Didn't it say that Abraham is as good as dead? He's 100 years old. How is he going to have any children? I said, yeah, you're right. So you know, there's an understanding there that it was only Sarah that couldn't have any children. But we're going to read on later that Abraham has a lot more sons. So Okay, so let's get back to, Sarah died at 127 and was buried in Kiryat Arba, presently located as Hebron. Okay, and that's in the West Bank. I like to tell you that when I was in Israel, we went there, but if I would have gone there, I wouldn't be here today. So it's Muslim controlled, and you, in fact, there was a sign out there basically in so many words that said, you know, you're taking your life into your own hands if you go beyond this point, if you're not a Muslim. But so we didn't go there. We went the other direction to Shiloh. So
Is that D?
Sarah is buried in Kiryat Arba, present day Hebron. Yeah, I had already given that, didn't I? No?
It says Sarah. It says Sarah.
Did I mess up on the fill-ins?
It says Sarah instead of Sarah. It says
Oh,
Sarah.
sorry. Okay,
It's very, very-
yeah,
You're not in a hurry though.
I would, yeah. Wouldn't you know it? I make mistakes and I was done with this early. So buried,
Here we go.
yeah, present day Hebron. Sarah is buried in Kiryat Arba, present day Hebron,
And that means city of four,
city of four,
because of the patriarch.
patriot, yeah. And there's more than four there, so yeah. You know, and it's, well, here, let me go on. 3 separate times, the book of Joshua tells us that the city of Kiryat Arba was named after the ruler of the city, a man called Arba, who was a powerful giant. Okay, so there was giants in the land. And this land, which I mean, who took this land? It was Caleb. Okay, it's Caleb who defeats the giant or the giants in the land, and he takes this city. The cave of Machpelah is in this city. The cave of Machpelah, commonly known today as the cave of the patriarchs. Okay, and then what else do we know about our matriarch Sarah? Her burial is the first one to be mentioned in the Bible. She is buried in the cave of the patriarchs, and tradition says that both Abraham and Sarah, as well as Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah, and Adam and Eve are buried there. So, and we know that she was 10 years younger than Abraham and was married to him in Ur of the Chaldees. She was Abraham's half sister. And like I said, that's, you know, that's where I come from as far as, was she a niece or was she the half sister? The fact that we read a few times that the half sister, you know, Moses, I think Moses got it right. Moses or Josephus? I'm gonna go with Moses. Okay. Okay. All right. What was that? A lot closer, absolutely. Okay, now in letter E, Isaiah 51:2, Sarah, it's mentioned that Sarah, the mother of the chosen race. Doesn't say it exactly like that, but in Isaiah 51:2, Sarah, the mother of the chosen race. Sarah is mentioned in the Tanakh, Isaiah 51:2, as the mother of the chosen race. She is also mentioned several times in the New Testament. If you want to write it down, Romans chapter 4 and in chapter 9, 4:19 and 9:9, if you want the exact verse. Galatians, all right, Galatians 4:21. And then in Hebrews 11:11, and in 1 Peter 3:6. So we read about her quite a bit, not only in Genesis, but throughout the Bible. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention something about Josephus. Josephus was an excellent historian, but when he was alive, he was considered a traitor by the Jews. You have to remember that because he was really in the back pocket of the Caesar. And so some of what he writes becomes skewed. And just have to know that when you're studying him.
Right.
So just because Josephus says it doesn't mean it's accurate.
Right.
Or it's not tainted.
Right.
It may
Yeah.
be.
And even today, there's a lot of there's a lot of rabbis that they won't quote from Josephus. They still don't hold him in high esteem that he's, even he had firsthand knowledge. It doesn't mean that everything he said is correct, but there's a lot of what he said that was just spot on.
He was an excellent historian.
Right. Okay, the Midrash says, along with her husband Abraham, that Sarah, you may have caught this at a previous time we did this parashah, but Sarah was instrumental in teaching thousands of people about the belief in one God. The Midrash says Abraham would guide the men and Sarah would influence the women. Also, just like Abraham, in fact, I think Abraham got a lot of this from Sarah. Sarah was known for her kindness and hospitality. It would be Abraham who welcomed in the three strangers, but who cooked all the meal? So were you going to say something,
Yeah,
Pastor?
I was just gonna say the reason we called our women's ministry Sarah's tent is for that reason, that her tent, the walls were always open and all the women would come to her tent to learn how to be a mother and a wife and how to cook.
Yeah.
So that's why we called it Sarah's tent.
Well, I'm going to show you something else that's interesting with Sarah, and we'll get to it. Because it says Sarah welcomed with open arms all who visited her tent. The rabbis also tell us that God told Abraham to listen to Sarah, that she was a greater prophet than he. Well, yeah, no, well, sometimes men, we have to take a back seat, and I don't even know if it's sometimes, I think it's most of the time. So when Sarah was 127 years old and her son, what was that?
Go ahead, emasculate men.
Okay.
See,
When Sarah was 127 years old and her son Isaac was 37, God commanded, and remember, this is my understanding, because I had a little talk with Maria earlier, and she says, why did we miss this? Why do we miss this? That when Sarah dies at 127, how old was she when she had Isaac? When she was 90. So you figure it out, 37 years old when she died. Okay, God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac on the altar. Abraham took his son up to, went to Mount Moriah to bring him as a sacrifice. As he was about to slaughter the son, and I'm paraphrasing everybody, I'm just, promised him, it was an angel that stopped him, telling him to stop. The angel explained to Abraham that God had never really intended that Isaac be slaughtered, but rather he was testing him, wanting Abraham to demonstrate his unwavering loyalty to God. That's one understanding. Abraham now had proved that he was indeed God-fearing. Okay, there's other commentaries that speak about Isaac actually being killed and resurrected. But when Sarah, and then what I'm going to go on because we're still talking about Sarah. When Sarah heard that her son had almost died, it was too much too much for her to bear. Sarah died at 127 years. So I just thought that instead of just talking about like her death or whatever, let's talk about, Sarah. So this woman is like what we say is the mother of the chosen race, and the chosen race being the Hebrews. Okay, but we can move on now, and what we find is oh, I know what I was going to do. With Sarah's tent, I'll probably cover it later on when we get to Isaac. But it was very interesting. So you guys don't want to get up and leave. Okay. Okay, when Abraham, after she dies, so Abraham now approaches the local people of Kiryat Arba to negotiate for a burial plot. We have a whole chapter here, and it just goes back and forth. Did you notice that? Going over it again and again and again. Okay, the locals are called Hittites, the son of Heth. They are the designated people of the land. The Midrash interpretation highlights that the unusual nature of this chapter, with its lengthy description of Abraham's purchase, that the negotiations go for 3 rounds. Okay, because what does Abraham do? He states explicitly that he is seeking a permanent right to the land. He is not asking just for a burial plot or a partial rental, as maybe the Arabs are claiming today, but he wants a permanent land that belongs to him. The Hittites, like Abraham, avoid the term to sell. And they state to Abraham that Abraham should feel free to bury his dead in whatever tomb he wants. Okay, they're very, you notice they are very kind to Abraham. The Hittite spokesperson is non-committal. They do not say yes, and they do not say no, but they leave the matter just hanging there. This approach assumes that the Hittites wish to avoid the transfer of property to a as far as they're concerned, Abraham is a non-resident. He's just visiting. He's a wonderful man, but you're not going to own any property in our land. Okay. We do not know if this was the custom of that time, but I'm just speculating. We do know that this is an attitude of the Israelites who own their land elsewhere in the Bible. We read later on that even others, they want to own the land. Okay. It does appear that the Hittites respect Abraham, and that is why they are polite with him. Round 1. Now we're going to the second round. Abraham bows and is being polite. The negotiations now go back and forth. And Abraham now names a specific plot for this preferred burial site, indicating that he will pay the full value. All right, the Midrash says that this field and cave was shown to Abraham, and there was a sweet smell. And what did it smell like? I don't know how he would know, but it was the smell of Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Okay. Abraham knew that this is where Adam and Eve were buried. And now you know why they say that even Adam and Eve are buried there. You would say, well, who buried them there? Maybe the Lord, maybe Adam buried Eve, and then his son buried him, and we had no clue until this parashah. Go ahead, Sharon.
I need your permission to read something from the Zohar.
Read it.
Not
Right.
the Bible.
Okay.
Abraham long recognized the cave of Machpelah by a certain mark, and he had long set his mind and heart on it, for he had once entered the cave and seen Adam and Eve buried there. He knew that they were Adam and Eve because he saw the form of a man. And while he was gazing, a door opened into the Garden of Eden, and he perceived the same form standing near it. And then it goes on and on. That,
Right.
From there, that people will see Adam at their death. But anyway, I thought that part was
That's
very
interesting. Yeah. You know, and I get the same type of commentaries or reading, you know, going to the midrash, you know, and you know, it's interesting, but it's not in the word, you know, so take it for what it's worth. Okay, at all costs, this is the property that Abraham was going to purchase. And now you know why, you know, he kept going after it and after it and after it. In round 3, the price is revealed as 400 shekels. Okay. This seems to be a very expensive price, but Abraham does not counter and pays the full asking price. The field at 400 shekels, 400 shekels at today's value is $128,000. Now think about that time back then. A field like that with the cave would probably only be worth, what, 5 shekels? You know, something like that, 10 shekels. But we're talking, he paid the full price of 400 shekels, okay? As with likely the norm in ancient times, no mention is made of a written contract. Do you guys remember the days when a handshake was the agreement? Yeah. Well, if you spit in your hand and did the handshake, that was as good as that was slippery. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
The whole idea of burials is a pretty interesting biblical concept. This past weekend, I was talking about the body of Moshe was buried right there in the valley of Amon Gog. And we speculated as to the reason why. But here we have Sarah being buried in the cave of a Hittite, which was a giant tribe. So there's something there. And then we have Jacob also buys land in Shechem from the giants. So, and he's buried there. And then remember, Jacob's not buried there, but Joseph is buried there because Joseph wants his bones taken up to the promised land, and they choose Shechem for that burial site, which is also in the midst of the giant tribes. So there's something about that that's very interesting and hard to get our minds around. But and then just to mention too, the negotiations here with Ephron, he's the son of Zohar. It's not the same thing, but I don't think, but interesting.
Yeah. You know, Ephron's sale of his land rights to Abraham is narrated as an oral contract. But what was binding in this contract? It wasn't just between the two men. There was Hittite witnesses there to both see the agreement of the terms and Abraham's payment. Okay, so that is what was binding. It's like they knew that this land now belongs to Abraham. Okay, the cave and the land now belongs to Abraham, and he could now bury Sarah. You know, this is one of the 3 places that the nations of the world cannot charge Israel and say to them that this is stolen land. Go ahead, Maria.
When we say we bury our dead, I automatically think you dig a hole and you put the person in. But they didn't do that. They wrapped them and then they laid them out. They were not buried.
Yeah.
So do we just use the word buried as the essence of dying?
No, I think today
Somewhere.
burying has the meaning of burying. You're gonna dig a hole and you're gonna put the person in there.
Well,
Back
who
at this
started that?
time, I don't know who started it, but I do know that back then, Maria, they would put them in the tomb, just as you said, and when all you had left was the bones, then they would gather the bones, put them in a box, and they would be placed like in a cave,
Yeah.
with all the others. And you could have your whole family in there. You could have 30, 40, generations of people there.
Not the resurrection.
Your whole family rises boy, wouldn't that be a beautiful sight? Your whole family rises at once, we can only pray. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, I don't know when the whole thought of burying like we do today started, but it's most probable that at some point in time, the burials like we do today were for the less wealthy people, and the wealthy people had caves. We have the same idea today where people have huge headstones or huge sepulchres or mausoleums. The average person doesn't want to put the money into that.
Right.
So, so I think that's kind of what we're looking at here. This was a place of honor, because when you read later on in the Bible, we know that people are buried.
Right.
So,
Because I know criminals and the poor, they were the ones that were buried.
yeah, I think it was a social thing.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember the cemetery, well, now cemeteries, they just put a marker, the huge headstones and everything that's done, really been done away with. But I remember there's a cemetery out in East Los Angeles that they had a huge, the headstone had to be maybe from this table to that table, and it was probably went up about at least 12, 15 feet. And I remember a person saying, man, must be a great person that's buried there. And the person said, no, it's just a person that was wealthy. So that and if you had the money, you could pay for something like that.
Is that Calvary?
That was at Calvary. Yeah, absolutely.
That's where my family is.
At Calvary, yeah. Yes, this was and you used to drive down towards it. I don't know if that's 3rd Street. I think it is 3rd Street. You drive down 3rd Street. When you come right upon it, you see this huge, it's not there anymore. Now they've taken it all out and they just put little markers, so, but I just remember that person saying that, man, that must have been a great, person buried there. No, just a wealthy person,
Right.
So the 3 places, if you want to know what they are, is the cave of Machpelah. Okay, we just read about that, where Abraham paid Ephron in Genesis 23:16. Okay, that cannot be disputed. We know that the Jewish people or Hebrew people purchased that. The Temple Mount is the other one. David gave Arnon in 1 Chronicles. You can read that in 1 Chronicles 21:25. And then the burial plot of Joseph, and we talked about that. And he also bought the field there, and that's in Genesis 33:19. So these are the 3 places, but you know what? They'll still question it and say that their people have been there, and forever. Well, they were in borrowed land. God had already destined that land for Israel. Okay, Roman numeral 2, Abraham purchases the cave of Machpelah and the adjoining field. You have to understand that he didn't just purchase the cave. All that area surrounding it was also owned by Abraham. So purchases is the fill-in. It cost 400 shekels, a very expensive price.
You can get a female virgin for 100.
For 100? Exactly. Or you can go to high school and meet someone and for a lot less than 400, but yet she's worth a lot more. So okay, priceless. Oh,
Great price.
and letter B, Roman numeral 2, letter B, no written contract. The locals witnessed the transaction, and that was important. You know what, Maria? The locals witnessing the transaction was like spitting on your hand and doing the handshake. That was binding. Okay, you guys, now we're going to go into chapter 24. In chapter 24, we meet Abraham's trusted servant. How many times do you hear the name of this trusted servant in chapter 24? 0. Okay. Here in chapter 24, the servant's name is never mentioned. We have to go all the way back to chapter 15 to see who Abraham's most faithful servant is. Okay, in Genesis 15, verses 2 to 3, it says, "But Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me since I am childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. Abram also said, since you have given me no son, no one who has been born in my house is my heir." So Eleazar was going to inherit everything of Abraham and Sarah, okay, if God wouldn't have intervened. But isn't it something? I mean, we're gonna go there, but he tells Eleazar, his most trusted servant. I don't know how he told him, but he said, I don't want my son to marry basically a foreigner in this land. But he tells that to Eleazar, and where is he from? Damascus. I mean, I wonder how that settled with him. He doesn't want him to marry a foreigner. Well, I'm a foreigner, but then again, if he was such a trusted servant, which we read, and what we're going to read is he had such loyalty to Abraham that he knew that Abraham was listening to God. Go ahead, Kathy.
Maybe the Lord just didn't want his son to Isaac to marry a Canaanite because the Canaanite had the Nephilim blood, and maybe Damascus didn't.
Yeah. Well, and then you think about him going back to his homeland. They were idol worshipers, but there was something there that he had to go back from his own family line. And I've always thought that. Why would Abraham, most trusted servant, go nameless in this chapter? Because they never mention his name. After Eleazar had encountered Rebekah and realized that she was the one he was sent to find, he requested permission from her father and brother that she return with him to marry Isaac. His initial statement to them is, I am a servant of Abraham. That's in Genesis 24:34. And indeed, throughout his journey, he constantly referred to as the servant. By his name not being mentioned, we learn that this was not about Eleazar, the person. It was about the mission. That was the important thing here. we learned that, Eleazar was so dedicated to Abraham that at no time did his own self-interest get in the way of fulfilling this mission. He was a mere servant. Well, I shouldn't even say that. He was such a trusted servant, you know. He was basically, he was so trusted, he was an extension of Abraham. And what he would say, and when he went over to find a wife for Isaac, did he go by himself? He went with a lot of other servants. So all the other servants knew that if whatever he said, they were going to do. It was like I said, it was like an extension of Abraham. Think about it. Here is Eleazar, at one time the heir of all that Abraham owned. And then after the birth of Isaac, he lost it all. You know, I mean, you could look at it that way, or the fact that he never had it all. It was just something like, this is what I'm going to do if I don't have a son. Go ahead, Sharon.
What about Ishmael? I mean,
Yeah.
why was Eleazar gonna get everything and not Ishmael if he didn't have a son? Another son?
Well, because right here with, go ahead, Maria.
Pastor Bruce said it once that, usually the child that was adopted into the family was considered higher than even the child that was born naturally in the family. So it's the adoption in, the bringing in.
Well, and the thing about, but Ishmael wasn't adopted.
No.
Yeah, he
Ishmael
was-
wasn't adopted.
Yeah, he was Hagar's son.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna read, because we read there later on that he was not the son of promise. Yeah, the covenant would not go through Ishmael. It would go through Sarah's son. And we're gonna read that too with Keturah and, you know. But in Roman numeral 3, Abraham's servant goes nameless in chapter 24, but we know who he is. Eleazar of Damascus. That's Roman numeral 3. And in letter A, this is not about Eleazar, it's about the mission. To Eleazar, his task of finding a wife for his master's son was his goal, not what is in it for me. One characteristic of Eleazar's mission was his tremendous focus. When he arrived, when he arrived into town, he didn't go around looking at the attractions. Hey, let me see what's here, you know. In fact, he didn't even check into the local Motel 6 to rest. Instead, he just went straight to work. He got there and went straight to work. Even after he found Rebecca, he knew that he found his master's bride. Here, he wouldn't eat. He still didn't allow himself to relax. When he was invited to Rebecca's house or home, the entire family sat down to eat. And what does he say? I will not eat until I have stated my business. And he said, speak on. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. So as Pastor Bruce said, he wouldn't even eat. He had to take care of the mission that he was sent out to do. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, I really found it interesting. I found it interesting because Eleazar means God is my help.
My help.
And that first prayer, you know, the very first prayer is in that 24. First recorded prayer is in verse 12 of 24. I just thought that was God was his help. I mean,
Oh, he
wasn't-
was.
It wasn't about him.
Yes. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
And to the point you made that it's about the mission, that goes to my point. Figure out the essence and then go for the details when you're studying the word. Once you capture the essence, now you have something to work with. If you just build one detail on the next, we end up with all kinds of weird thoughts and ideas.
Right.
And rabbi trail. And so capture the essence of what the scripture is saying and then pull out the details of it.
I will do, and then I will hear. Yeah. So, and that's it. It was all about the mission. Okay, when Rebecca's family requested that she be given several months to prepare for her marriage, didn't that seem like a reasonable thing to do? Give her, oh yeah, let's stay here for a while. I didn't get into the age, but I mean, Sarah was 10 years younger than Abraham. I don't believe that she was no 14-year-old, but we do know that Isaac had to be about what?
40.
Almost 40.
Was 40.
It
It says there.
says right there.
I read somewhere last night, and I don't know which book I read out of, but I read in one book that said that she was 3 years older than childbearing. She was 3 years older as a woman who's childbearing. So I don't know if that meant 17 or 18, somewhere like that. As far as I know that you can have children before that, but I'm talking about the women of that day. I don't know, because like Mary, they thought that she was 16 or 17. So I'm thinking 3 years more. That maybe she was. No, not 12.
Childbearing.
No. But I'm talking about. No, I understand that, but I mature.
Okay, so when Eliezer responded, when they said, can she stay for 3 months or several months? He said, do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way, send me away so that I may go to my master. And he got his way. He didn't feel compelled to comply with the social norms or the social standards. He knew his mission and that his mission would succeed, even if he were asking for the impossible. And that's what he was doing. A lot of times, when you read this, you take notice that he's invited in and here, we'll take care of your camels, we'll give you plenty to eat, this and that. But a lot of it had to do with what did Rebecca show her brother, her family, all this stuff that Eliezer had given her. So they knew that this man had a lot of wealth. And if all he is a servant, how much wealthier is her going to be her future husband? And they already knew Abraham. Okay, so they already know that he went away and when he started saying, I'm a servant of Abraham, they knew very well who they were talking to. So his reputation is probably already preceded him. They know that there's a lot of wealth here. Let's see what's in it for us. Stay here for 3 months.
He came with
10 loaded camels. Yeah. And and you notice that everything he asked for, the Lord gave to him. The Hebrew name, as Tila said, Eliezer, God is my help. It's also interesting to note that Eliezer traveled, that you're saying 3 years, okay? I think it was less than that, but he traveled 450 miles where Rebecca was, in the town of Nahor in Mesopotamia. The sages say that this was a miracle that God gave to Eliezer. We're gonna think like, oh no, that couldn't have happened. But they say that Eleazar arrived there in one day.
What?
That's what the Midrash says, that he arrived there in one day. That was one of the miracles. Well, we know there's a lot of miracles, and if anyone can do it, God can. So I don't know if he was 40, probably a good estimate. But if this happened right after Sarah died and was buried, even a year later,
Chapter 25.
okay,
20.
he was 40 years old when he took her, and that's talking about into the tent, right? So when Eleazar was there, yeah. So he married her. You're right. Married her at 40. I stand corrected. 40 years old. You're all right, Maria. Okay, in verses 62 to 67, okay, now Isaac had come back from his journey. Okay, we read that it was right before we get into this chapter. It says, this is right after the binding. Okay, right after the binding, it says, so Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham lived in Beersheba. Why would he go there? That's about what, 400 miles from Hebron? So, he goes south, and he should have went north to get back home. But right here in verse 62, 67, in 24, how would you say that? Ber Lachorot, Ber Lachorot. It says Isaac had come from going to Ber Lachorot, for he was living in the Negev. Isaac went out to meditate in the field towards evening. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. And we know the story where he was out there, and then Rebecca sees him and says to the servant, to Eleazar, who is it? Who is that? And he says, that's my master's son. Okay, so she knew it was Isaac. So Isaac was praying in the field, and while he was praying, he looked up, and there out in the distance, he could see the camels coming towards him. Some commentaries say that Isaac was just out walking and not praying at all. Others say that Isaac was using this moment at the end of each day to have some time to himself to process the significant events and everything that was going on, and just time to himself. We know it was Abraham who sent his servant out to bring a wife back to his son Isaac. But we are never told that Isaac knew about this arrangement that his father had made. Okay, here he is out there, and the camels are coming back. So off in the distance, Rebecca too could see a man walking towards them. Like I said, so she asked him, who is it? And so what does Rebecca do? She gets the veil and she covers her face. Yeah. So, and that's a tradition in the Middle East.
Did they have a ceremony?
Probably, I don't think so. You know what their ceremony was, Maria?
That's off the camel, and looks at her, and
And they go into the tent. They,
Hardly,
that's the ceremony.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We won't. We won't. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, yeah, I'm in the names, okay, and so I really, I've had this before because I really think it's beautiful. Isaac went there often, and we know he never left the country, he was there. But that's the well of the one who lives and sees me, that Ber Lahai Roy. And so it's not by chance that he's there to me, it's not by any chance that he's there, because that's where he's communing with the
Yep.
Father.
The sages tell us, Tila, when was he there? In the evening.
In the evening.
How many prayers in the day do we have? We have the morning, afternoon, and evening prayer. They say this is where the evening prayer came from Isaac.
That's when God came down to that.
In the cool of the evening. Yeah. So, but that's what they're saying. It's from Isaac. The Torah tells us that Isaac indeed finds the comfort for which he is searching. Rebekah becomes a source of support and love for him. Isaac then brought her into the tent. There's your ceremony, Maria, of his mother Sarah. And he took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death. Now, here's what I wanted to share with you that I gave you a little insight earlier. The Midrash reports that as long as Sarah was alive, there used to be 3 miracles that happened in her tent. Okay. There was a spirit, a cloud over her tent. The Midrash, it has it in the Bereshit Rabbah 60:16. We know that the doors were open to offer hospitality, but it was that spirit that was over her tent constantly, and when Sarah was alive. Also, she baked bread, and the dough was blessed that it stayed fresh all the time that it was there. If people came into her tent, it was fresh bread. Okay, and the other one was a light, a candle. She used to light a candle on one Shabbat evening, and it would stay lit all the way to the next Shabbat. The cloud, the spirit over the tent. Okay, and they all stopped when Sarah died. Now, when Isaac brought Rebekah here, let me get through this thought. When Isaac brought Rebekah in, it all started again. Again, all these. So the Midrash says that this about Sarah's tent. These 3 miraculous events that occurred in the tent during Sarah's lifetime resurfaced again with Isaac being married to Rebekah. It seems that Isaac is comforted not by Rebekah's physical and emotional presence, but by her assuming the role of that Sarah had over her son, that doing all these duties and all this coming back. It's like he knew the spirit was there again through Rebekah. Now, this is the thing. The fact that with Rebekah now in Sarah's tent, once again, the Shabbat candles burned from one Shabbat to the next, the fresh challah that was always on the table, and the holiness that's over her. Sarah's tent identifies the temple in Jerusalem. With these characteristics of Sarah and Rebekah's tent, in the temple fire, always burning, the loaves, the 12 loaves, what the Midrash tells us that it was because of Sarah's tent that when they built the temple, it was built to copy Sarah's tent. We've always read where Moshe went up to heaven and saw exactly the way it should be. You know, like I said, the implication is that the holiness of Sarah's life was like that of the temple itself, and that Rebekah echoed that. The Midrash said it's not just that the holiness of Sarah's life was equal in the measure of the holiness of the temple. Rather, when faced with the task of building a home for God, it was Sarah's home, her tent that was used as the blueprint. Okay, go ahead now, Kathy.
Okay, it occurred to me, it's also the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The
Mhm.
burning bush is the light, which is the Father. The bread of life is the Son. And the Spirit hovered over the waters, that's the cloud, which is the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
Good.
could be. Maria, go ahead, Maria.
Going back to the tent, did they each have their individual tent? Like Sarah had her tent, Abraham had his tent, Hagar had her own.
Hagar was outside of the boundary. No, I don't know,
But they all
yeah,
had their house.
yeah,
Um,
yes.
Abraham did not live with one.
Yeah.
He lived by himself.
It had to be a different arrangement, Maria, because, you know, well, not only that, because like I said, when we get to, when she dies, and where is Abraham? He's about 400 miles away. What are you doing 400 miles away from your wife? You know, you know, what was that? Running away.
Was it like that during the Exodus? Did the
I-
families live together in one tent, or was it still the custom of the man to live separately?
We're not told with the Exodus.
I want
The
you to know.
assumption, the
You gotta tell me.
assumption would be that all the families were together. Because if you take note, before they left Egypt, all the families were together like in one place, and they could not leave. They all had to get together.
That works with one wife. How does it work with two
Yeah,
or
I
three
know it.
wives in
Oh,
one tent?
geez, I know it. Well, and concubines.
And concubines and 10 kids.
That is a big tent. Well, it's just like this past Shabbat, when he was talking about, you know, they would have a wagon and they build a house on top of like a mobile home. They build it on top and they could have 3-4 rooms. You know, I'm thinking of those wagons from out west, you know, and how could you put 3-4 rooms? So no, Maria, I can't answer that. I don't know, but I would imagine that all the families were together. But at this time, yes, Sarah had her own tent, you know, and Isaac took her into his mother's tent. Isaac is the only one. How many wives did Isaac have? One. How many concubines did Isaac have? Zero.
That's 'cause
I
he
mean,
went blind.
Well, no, there is the pattern that we have to live by, okay? Not Abraham and definitely not Jacob. So, go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, there's an issue of practicality. So when you're going on the Exodus, you are, it's like when we go out to Sukkot, you don't bring everything with you. Well, most of us don't.
I think you guys would kick me out of this church if I showed up with 4 trailers and
I think.
what are you doing in each one?
You never want to overlook that they're human beings, so they have to work within the confines of what's going on in their life.
Right.
When they settle down, when you go to Israel and you see the Bedouin tents, these things are huge.
They're huge. They are.
They could be 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, no, they are.
So it's,
Like in Ben-Hur, they brought the 4 horses into the
yeah,
tent.
yeah, the tent was their, that's where they lived. I mean, everything was in there. And then when we go back to Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, they are a picture of the Trinity. So the Father and Son are very clear. Though Jacob, as symbol of the Holy Spirit, he's the one that fought the battles. He's the one that finagled and moved things around through life to work it to the benefit of in this case himself. Yitzhak never left the land of Israel and only had one wife, and that's a clear picture of Yeshua with his bride. So, and I realize we're spiritualizing that whole thing there, but it is a pretty clear picture of the Trinity.
Yeah. No, that's good. In Roman numeral 3, B, the fill-ins, three miracles occurred in Sarah's tent. Candle remained lit, and then the next fill-in is bread. Bread was always fresh. And divine cloud would be the fill-in over the tent. 3, bread and cloud. And then, as I said in the Midrash, in letter C, the temple was patterned after Sarah's tent. That is interesting.
Not the courtyard, just the temple.
Temple, just the holy place. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm a little confused. Is this all extra biblical, right?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes,
so-
yes, it is. Yeah, yeah, no, this isn't from, I can't give you a verse in Genesis that says this. It's all extra biblical writings. Why, you gonna throw a tomato at me, Bill?
Are you adding to the scriptures?
That's worse than a tomato. But let's move on. Okay, in Genesis 25, 1 to 11. In Genesis 25, we're going to discuss Abraham's death and his descendants. We're going to hit, we only go up to from verse 1 to 18, because that's what the rest of this parashah contains. The first verse of Genesis 25 will spark a discussion as to who really is Abraham's second wife. The first verse says, now Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. Okay, some biblical scholars believe that Keturah was actually Hagar. Okay, and you may have read that. That's questionable. But what is not questionable is the legitimacy of the relationship between Abraham and Keturah. The word clearly states that Abraham took her as his wife. Okay, so who was Abraham's wife? Keturah? Well, let's look back a little. In Genesis 11:29, it says that Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. Then in Genesis 25:1, it says, now Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. The same verb took is used in both verses. And that gives us a clear understanding that Abraham had taken on these two women as wives. We all know about Sarah, but what do we know about Keturah? Okay. I had to go to First Chronicles chapter 1 in verse 32. Keturah is referred to as Abraham's concubine. Now, boy, now we're in a mess here. What is it? A concubine held a position somewhat above a slave, okay? A little bit higher than a slave, but below a wife. Yet she was not free, nor did she have the status or rights of a wife. The master of the concubine had sexual relations with her. If the concubine bore him children, then those children held an inferior status to those born of a wife. But they could not be elevated to that position of a full heir, or I should say, that they could be elevated as a full status of the heir only if the master says so. So to be a concubine meant that her master, what was it? If she's a concubine, that means he has a wife. So was Keturah a concubine while Sarah was alive? Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think how you prove it's not Hagar is, would Ishmael have to be mentioned
Yeah,
as one of the sons of Ishmael?
and
not
that,
mentioned?
yeah, and I'll probably hit that at the end, but you're absolutely right. You know, when they mention her sons, how many sons did Keturah have? Six. She had 6 sons, but you're right, Ishmael is not mentioned. So Keturah could not be Hagar, you know, but you're gonna find a lot of big name, you know, people out there that are gonna tell you that Keturah is actually Hagar. Go ahead, Tila. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill, were you done?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, again, you know, in looking up the names and stuff, and Hagar means flight or forsaken, and Keturah means fragrance or incense. Who changed her name? I mean, how do you get Hagar? Who changed Hagar's name to Keturah? That's my question.
Yeah.
You know, that, and I couldn't find anything.
I could.
Yeah, in different meaning, I couldn't find anything.
I couldn't either. I did a study on this about 2 or 3 years ago. And it was the same thing that, because I was being convinced that Keturah is actually Hagar. And yeah, and I just kept looking and looking, and you're right. If her name was changed to Keturah, God would have to have done that, and I would see it written somewhere. If it's not in the Bible, it'd be in some extra writings. It's not there.
Didn't Moses have the same problem? Yeah. That they thought when he remarried, that he married this other woman, but it was Zipporah
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
the same thing?
And that was one, we'll cover that when we get to that portion, but I'm one to believe that Zipporah is the Cushite woman, because I think I've shared with you before, my understanding is that it was a derogatory term, calling her, well, look at you, you married that Cushite woman or something. Well, people believe it's another woman. And is there a chance that he took a wife when he went all the way down into the middle of Africa or whatever, and came back? I can't recall the country. Ethiopia. When he went down to Ethiopia, because it's a common practice back then that if you want to have peace, you know, you give up one of your daughters, you know, in marriage. So could have Moses done that? Well, absolutely he could have. So I could be wrong, but my feeling was that Miriam was coming against her brother, and that was her way of getting at him, saying, you know, she was dark. She was from Midian, and look at, you married a Cushite woman. Well, you know, I just think that Zipporah was the only wife he had. That's just my understanding. You know, did he have concubines? We don't know, because it's not written like that. So, but yeah, so getting back to what Tila was saying, or, you know, we just can't find anything there about Keturah actually being Hagar. Okay, but we do find that when they mention all of her sons, Ishmael is not mentioned. Okay. Okay, so in Genesis, let me see. In Roman numeral 4, Abraham marries again and has 6 more sons. Does it bother any of you women here that all the sons are mentioned? We don't know how many daughters that he had. What, he had none? I don't think so. I think every now and then you're gonna, you know, we know from Sarah he didn't, but from Keturah it mentions the 6 sons. And like I said, well, we'll get to it. In Genesis 25:6, it says the sons of Abraham concubines were sent away, okay? This wouldn't be true if children from a full marriage, but this is true if you had a concubine, okay? So these children would have been sent away in the same way Ishmael was sent away. Abraham was said to be old and beyond having children at the age of 100. Paul referred to Abraham as being as good as dead as far as bearing children were concerned. So this is where when a person said, well, that proves when he had more children, well, that proves that it wasn't Abraham that couldn't have any kids. It was only Sarah. But then, like I said, my wife, as brilliant as she is, came back and said, well, then why did it say that Abraham was as good as dead? You know, I said, yeah, you're right. You know, so you had to be something like that. You're right. Well, I figured it out, Maria, to more like 140 some years old, but it had to be 5. Yeah, he died at 175. And then how old was later on too, having, he kept having children. The 6 sons born to Keturah mentioned in Genesis 25 would have to have been born to a man, and I put down at least 140 years old. Okay. If Abraham really did marry Keturah after Sarah died, which we were told that he did. Okay, what I have here, it was a miracle to have a child at 99. I should have put 100. It was a miracle to have a child at 100 years old. What about a man who's 147? So your fill-ins would be 100 and 147. Okay. So all of us in here, we're in the prime of our life. Okay, these children listed in verse 2 would have been more of a miracle than Isaac. The point we need to consider in Genesis 25, 1-6 is that Abraham became the father of many nations, okay, holding to the promise that God gave to Abraham, that he would be the father of a multitude of nations. I believe that Keturah was a concubine of Abraham, but like I said, I don't believe that Keturah was actually Hagar. And I'm getting back to what Bill said. The reason I don't believe it is because in Genesis 25:2, it mentions the name of 6 more sons. Okay, and as we said, when he mentions the 6 more sons, it doesn't mention Ishmael. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
It's interesting too that this past weekend we mentioned that Sheba and Dedan were going to come against. They were going to align themselves with the anti-Messiah, with Gog, and here these are his progeny.
Yeah,
Mentioned right here in verse 3. So these were not the sons of promise.
yeah, and they weren't the sons of promise. But it's funny, even with when Pastor Bruce is teaching. I mean, we're not going to jump in and say, well, this and that or whatever. But afterwards, we could have a discussion. But it's just like Amir Sephardi. I don't know if ever you heard him speak. He's a wonderful man. But he also says that God, the Gog and Magog and all this is Russia. He also says he believes that. But his thing is because of the Rosh, if you take it into Hebrew and everything, it's talking about Russia, but I, like you said it very well, that when you think about all the people in the world that have attacked Israel, Russia isn't there, but Turkey is. Turkey is definitely there. Go ahead, Tila.
But the only thing with Russia though, is that a lot of the ammunition and so forth, the shells, they said a lot of the, this is what I saw in one of the videos of it that he put on, that the shells were made in Russia, and I don't know how they know that, but a lot of the equipment and stuff, that the money and everything was, I don't know,
Yeah.
so.
No, when they pick up the shells, they can track it. It's just like in the other places, Iran.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the equipment that's coming in and everything that's being used, it's from Iran.
Yeah.
And Iran hates,
Yeah.
Israel just as much as
Yeah.
Turkey does.
Turkey is one of those nations, Turkey is our ally.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So they're a very deceptive people. Russia was our ally in World War II, but it's very tenuous. It was because we had a common enemy, was the only reason they were our ally. But Turkey has been a member of NATO since the very beginning, and they're a very deceptive people.
right, right.
So,
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I wonder if they both could be right, because did you say the Scythians?
yeah.
Came down out of Russia, yeah, and now occupy Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to promote some new doctrine, you know, I just want to bring out a new viewpoint. Because I don't think it's just conclusive Russia. Russia's been our Cold War enemy now for my entire life.
Yeah,
And so Russia is the bad guy, always. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. It's true in the American mind. And these concepts are kind of come out of the American mind, the American theology. So, just like I don't think much of Bible prophecy involves America at all. And much of Bible prophecy doesn't really involve Russia either. It's the Middle East is the focal point.
Yeah.
And that would include Turkey,
Mhm.
not Russia.
Right.
And you have to remember, until about 100 years ago, Russia was known for its Christianity. I mean, they were a Christian nation all the way.
St. Petersburg.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They were a Christian nation. So they've turned, but there's still a lot of believers in Russia. Turkey, no, Turkey they have believers, but they're a Muslim country. Yeah.
What about that thing that you told us about Damascus, the gate of Damascus? That something was gonna happen, it was
Yes, go down.
destroyed?
Well, Damascus is in Syria, not Turkey. And it's the capital, and it's gonna, Zechariah tells us it's gonna be destroyed in one day.
One day it's gonna be wiped off the face of the earth.
Damascus is in kind of in southern Syria. It's
It's not near the
Yeah.
Israeli border, but it's
I mean, it's
not that far.
It's
Yeah,
probably a few hundred miles to the Turkish border.
Isn't Elias's, name?
He was from
Damascus.
Yeah.
That's why I thought earlier when I mentioned that, when Abraham is telling him, I don't want my son to be married from like a foreign, the Canaanites, Well, I wonder what he thought. Well, geez, I'm from Damascus, but his loyalty went much further than that. Go ahead, Sharon.
This is just a question for Pastor Bruce. He was talking about, the Mongolians and the Scythians. And, I've not heard much about Mongolia and who they're for. I mean, I know they have shamans. I know they don't really, they're not Muslim. But he was saying that they're famous for their bows and their horses, and Mongolians now still revere their horses. So it's just, do you know any more than that as far as Mongolia?
Mongolia's been incorporated, at least politically, into China. It's at the southern part of China. They're really not Chinese, they're Mongolian. And, they're very nomadic people. So you have that strip that's Turkey, Armenia, Mongolia. And they all come from the nomadic tribes. Whereas above that, Russia was not nomadic. China is not nomadic, and everything below it was really not nomadic. It's a strip of nomads. And in that they have a mixed flavor of religion and politics. And the nomadic people have always been majorly aggressive people. And I think it's because they feel that squeeze between the north and the south. And so they become this entity kind of unto themselves.
Right.
And I'm not sure, the Mongolians, I'm not even sure what faith they really hold to.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of off-brand faiths for the most part.
They're not connected with Genghis Khan, are they?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
They're part of the lost tribe.
Well, we have found Jews in China, there's no doubt, but you'd be hard pressed to say all Chinese are part of the lost tribes. Yeah, but you have to remember the Jews have filtered into every country in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care what nation you're from, you've got Jews in your population
Yeah,
somewhere.
probably by way of India. Who is it that went to India? What disciple? That, not Philip, no. But yeah, I forget. Well, let's get back. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Maria, and then we'll move on.
This is not biblical, but Mongolia, they have a certain type of horse, they look like ponies. They let loose, they're wild, and you are forbidden to take any of their horses out of the country or to reproduce them in any way. That's how special they are in Mongolia.
Oh, I never knew that. Yeah. When it says that Abraham took another wife after Sarah died, my belief is that Abraham married his concubine Keturah and made her his wife. In Genesis 25, 12-18, I said we can only guess if Abraham did not include Ishmael among those who received gifts while he was living, in verse 6. Whatever the truth really is, Ishmael returned to join Isaac to bury their father. Okay, at least a temporary truce was made to facilitate this when Abraham died. They buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field that Abraham had purchased for Sarah himself. And that's back in Genesis 23. Although Abraham was dead, the purpose and the promises of God remained in effect. Okay, so in letter B, Abraham dies at 175 years old. 175 is your fill-in. Both Ishmael and Isaac bury their father in the cave of Machpelah with Sarah. So bury is your fill-in there. Now in verse 11, Moses reminds us of this truth. And it came about after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac. And Isaac lived in Beshvarat. Through Isaac, the covenant promises were to be carried on. The work of God continues even when even when the others pass away. The torch has been passed from the father to the son, from Abraham to Isaac. Okay. As for Ishmael, it says, I have heard you. Behold, I will bless him, and I will make him fruitful, and I will multiply him exceedingly. He shall become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. Abraham had always had a special place in his heart for his first son, Ishmael. But it's only with reluctance and under great pressure that Abraham sent his son away. Abraham would have been content for God's purposes and promises to have been fulfilled through Ishmael. That's what we read here. He would have been just as happy if Ishmael would have carried it on. God, remember, he petitioned God to look in the favor of his son. God refused to substitute this child of self-effort for the child of promise. But he did promise to make him a great nation. Okay, in verses 13 through 16, it records the names of the sons of Ishmael, who were the 12 promised prince. Once again, God kept his promise to his servant Abraham. Ishmael died at the age of 137, and he was buried. Notice that it was not said that he had been placed in the cave of Machpelah. For this was a monument of hope for the people of promise. The land of Canaan was not to be the possession of Ishmael, nor his descendants. Rather, we are told that they settled from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt. As one goes towards to Assyria, he settled in defiance of all his relatives. And this is important because we're going to read in this verse, one more promise is shown to be fulfilled. The promise God made to Hagar years before, when she says that her son, that he is going to be what? A wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against him and everyone's hand will be against him. And he will live to the east of all his brothers. Okay, in letter C, Isaac, not Ishmael, carries on the covenant promise. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
I was just gonna say, it's kind of interesting because Ishmael and Isaac get together to bury their father. So Ishmael must have been close by the whole time. Because, you had to bury the body pretty quick. So he must have been in that area. I think he probably left the area here in verse 18 in defiance, and he now goes and he begins his own basic kingdom, these 12 princes, and he's east of Egypt, so that pushes him out into the area of Saudi Arabia and those other Middle Eastern countries. So where Islam has its base.
Right.
So just kind of, we don't know that for sure, but that could be a strong possibility.
Well, like being called a wild donkey, and if that carries on, which we know it has, the people, the Arab people, you know what? They don't even like each other.
No.
You have different sects of Arabs and they don't, that is why to this day, Jordan doesn't want them. In Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, all these, they don't want them, but they'd rather see them take over Israel, a land that doesn't belong to them, and live there. So then probably later on, they could just take them over, because they're always at odds with each other. Okay, but the descendants of Ishmael became known as Arabs, which basically means nomads. From the beginning, the descendants of Ishmael were a warlike people, as they lived in hostility towards all the tribes related to them, and that's what I'm getting at. This fulfilled God's earlier word that Ishmael would be a wild donkey. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. Okay. And that's how he lived. They all live in hostility towards their own brothers. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, wild donkeys are known for living in the desert regions. And also, if you go back to Genesis, being a nomad or a wanderer is a curse. You're under the curse, because that was the curse of Cain, that you will wander.
Right.
And so, and it's interesting because we see that same curse starting to take hold even in our own country today. The homeless people are wanderers.
Yeah.
And it's a curse that they've come under. It's a spirit.
Yeah.
And here we go in this cyclical thing again, this cycle.
Yeah.
So we never break out of that.
Isn't it amazing?
Come from building cities instead of living in tents?
No, that goes to a deeper issue. City dwellers can be controlled. So, like Nimrod built Babylon, because when you have people within the city limits, you can control them. This is why the New World Order wants everybody to live in the city. They're trying to clear out the rural area, because in the rural area, you just don't have control over the people. But in the city, you do. So I think that goes into a political idea and a control issue, really.
Right.
So if you live in a tent, you're under a curse. If you live in the city,
You're controlled. This is Satan's domain, so really, you know what I mean? People say, I want to move, get off the grid, they're delusional.
Right.
You can't get off the grid, especially today. It's not even possible.
I don't know,
It's hard.
House or.
I don't think they lived in a tent or a house.
They just
They may have after the curse for protection, but in the garden, I'm not sure they needed it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, if the weather is pretty constant, it never rains, you get all your,
They were naked.
they were naked and they weren't afraid.
Yeah.
That goes to the TV book.
Speaking of Keturah's sons, of Hagar's son, later others settled in the Arabian Peninsula as well. So, and we're still talking about the descendants of Keturah in First Chronicles 1, 32-33, and some of Esau's descendants, among them the Amalekites. Okay, so now you know where the Amalekites came from. Okay, but there is a popular theory among Muslims and some Christians that the Arabian Muslims are direct descendants from Ishmael. And this is in the, well, here, it says, in fact, Muhammad claimed to be a descendant of Ishmael, according to the Quran. Okay, and that's your last fill-in in D. Muhammad claimed to be a descendant of Ishmael. And now you know why
Well, we have problems.
we have all these problems, especially in the Middle East. So, and that's our Torah study for today.